Hi, welcome to Highland Cottage. I'm Martha and this is Highland Cottage, and today we are going to talk about a group of recent books that are thrillers, horrors, and mysteries that take place in cults. I made coffee, tea, and some Kool-Aid. Grab yourself a mug or a Dixie cup, have a seat on the couch, and let's talk books. I didn't set out to read a bunch of books about cults. Cults aren't actually normally my thing. I'm not a big expert. I've seen, I guess, a few documentaries on Netflix, and that's about it. This kind of happened organically because of the advanced reader copies that I was given, and just the fact that I was cramming for StokerCon, and two of the books that I ended up reading from authors that I wanted to check out were about cults, which says that cults are a bit in the zeitgeist. Once I realized that I had read 7 books about cults in the last 40 or so days, I thought, okay, that's weird. And I went through my Goodreads looking for, cult books that I might have read in the past that I could throw into this list. And the answer was no, not really. Maybe Rosemary's Baby, if you want to, stretch the definition a bit. The first book is The Colony of Lost Souls, which is a thriller. It's a historical fiction, and it takes place in California in the 1930s. The Depression is a backdrop, and it kind of highlights the changes that were going through the country, the uncertainty in the country. Scapegoating is another thing that's happening. With all of that as the backdrop, this is a story fundamentally of 2 sisters, May and June. May is a practical woman who married for stability and comfort, and she's very smart, but she's not particularly adventurous. And June is much more free-spirited, and June has been gone out of May and her mother's life for a few years, and suddenly a letter appears out of the blue for May saying, hey, I live at this wonderful artist colony in California. It is a place of miracles. You should come. And May is in a very unhappy marriage, and she decides, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna go see my sister. I haven't seen her in a few years. I've been worried about her. And she decides that she's going to leave her loveless marriage and drive the car off to the coast and see what her sister is talking about. When she arrives to the Institute, she discovers a paradise. There's a beautiful mansion on the sea. There are bungalows on the beach. People are painting the ocean, sharing responsibilities. There are people of different races and ethnicities working happily side by side. There's some indications that there are queer people there as well, which is important to May because she knows that her sister June likes both men and women, which is something that she's had to hide. It's 1930s America. And she's glad that her sister was able to find some place where she could be more of herself. It's run by a husband and a wife. The wife is an accomplished painter, and the husband is an Englishman, very handsome, who has a certain way about him. He's very charismatic. Now, obviously, since it's a book on this list, you can kind of guess where this is heading. But what I really liked about this story is that both May and June are smart women. And neither of them are completely taken in by what Rex, who is the man, who's the leader, they're not really believing everything that he's trying to sell them. And both of them think that they can stay there and get what they want and what they need out of this situation without losing control of what's happening. And he knows that. And it's interesting because you can see very clearly through this book how people who aren't gullible, who aren't necessarily super vulnerable, can find themselves in a situation where they do get fooled, or maybe if not fooled, they get entrapped by people who are charming or appear to be one thing and actually are another, because they have built this entire system that allows them to continue the grift. And I found it very interesting because this goes very much into the underbelly of how it works, how they are getting their money, how they are keeping people there, how they are entrapping people who aren't believers, how they are stringing the believers along. This book I found very interesting and very human. I would say, given the subject matter, that you should check trigger warnings for every book on this list, because we are talking about people who are being coerced, manipulated, in some cases violated, certainly taken advantage of in ways that are emotional, physical, and sexual in some cases. So I would definitely look things up before you read if you have sensitivity. Now, while this story does get into the nitty-gritty in how a con like this works, it's not just a blow-by-blow account of, people being treated badly. It is actually fundamentally a hopeful story, and there is some justice, and it's just really a ripping good yarn. May, the protagonist, who we get her view through a vast majority of the book, she is relatable and kind of delightful in the way that she observes the world. Now, I listened to this as an audiobook, and Sarah Welburn, the narrator, did an excellent job. I particularly liked her chipper, clipped consonants that really evoked the period for me and brought the character of May to life. The author, Kelsey James, is new to me, but I will certainly be checking out more of her work. She works primarily in historical fiction, which is a genre that I used to love, but I got away from a little, not because it did anything wrong to me, just simply because I was finding other interests. But I'm thinking maybe I will want to get back into it, especially if there are authors like James waiting for me on the shelves. Now, the book Ecstasy, which just came out, isn't about a Branch Davidian type of cult. It is actually about a very old school denotative cult. It is about the cult of Dionysus. Now, it is a modern retelling of the play The Bacchae. If you don't know the Greek tragedy The Bacchae by Euripides, then I'm not going to tell you what it's about because I don't want to spoil it for you. If you do happen to know the play, then just know that this book is a very clever retelling of it in the modern day, and you will be delighted by it as much as one can be delighted by this particular tragedy. Now, as my father's daughter, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that if Euripides, Eumenides. Sorry, not sorry. So Ecstasy is about a former ballerina who is the widow of a very rich, very controlling hotelier. A dude who owns hotels. And she had basically abdicated choices in her life. She, in order to have the comfort and stability that she thought she craved in her 20s. She now lives a life where everything is chosen for her. And that is kind of the way she wants it, or she thought she wanted it, or she thought was the fair trade-off. I'm not sure. And her son is a chip off the old block, and not her block, his block. And he is opening the hotel that the father was building when he died unexpectedly on the Isle of Naxos in Greece. Now, this hotel, this resort, is an ultra luxury, highly curated, ridiculously upscale experience for, you know, the 0.01% who can afford it. The full schedule of meditation and breakfast delivered and massages and carefully curated excursions are designed to relax you into submission. And she's okay with that, except she's a bit bored. And she's wondering perhaps if there's more out there. It's a soft opening of the resort with the son, the mother, the son's pregnant wife, and the mother's old friend, who is also a former dancer, who has macular degeneration, and so she is going blind. Everything about the hotel is exceptional and perfect, except that on the beach below the hotel, there are a group of women who are camping. And they are partying well into the night. They're making a lot of noise. They're not super clean. They're a bit wild, and their numbers seem to be growing. And it is driving the son, the young hotelier, bonkers, because he can't control what they do. And it certainly isn't fitting the vibe that he is trying to create in his hotel. Now, there's something very intriguing about the freedom that these women seem to display. And our former ballerina is thinking about sneaking out, going down to the beach, though it will really make her son mad. At the same time, we are also getting the POV of a woman who is a drug dealer who travels the festival circuit like Glastonbury and Coachella and those sorts of things, selling drugs. And she has attached herself to the women on the beach. And it is a very compelling point of view. She is not a particularly sympathetic character, but it is intriguing, and it is a point of view that I have not read before. Pochoda does a great job of evoking a feeling that I got when I watched the first production of the Bacchae that I saw, which was that as you watch it, you are reminded of all the boxes that women are stuffed into, about the very narrow path that women can walk without sticking out too much, what is expected of us. And those boxes and those strictures certainly are going to exist, whether or not there's a book or a play about it, but it reminds you in a way that just pokes at you, and what Dionysus, the idea of Dionysus, offers, why that is so attractive. Pochoda does a great job of showing us a very specific situation, a very specific life, but at the same time making it feel universal and making the story, which takes place in this little microcosm of the world, makes it feel epic and mythical and of great import. The Salt Grows Heavy is a gorgeous novella, and I just want to straight up tell you how much I loved it. Oh my God, is it good? With the caveat that the things that I loved about it are the things that some reviewers find really annoying about it. So let me just state that right there. It has amazing language. Now, I consider myself a pretty eloquent person with a pretty broad vocabulary, and I love learning new words. So I was delighted that I came across several words that I had never seen before. And for me, none of them I found alienating. There was no word that didn't give me contextual clues about what they might be about. I wasn't going, oh no, I can't take all the polysyllabic nonsense. But I can understand that some people may think that, it's a bit much. I don't, because I think every word that Khaw uses can justify its existence there. This is how she writes, and this is how she speaks, and this is how she thinks. And she just happens to have an amazing grasp of the language and knows the exact right word that will evoke the exact feeling that she is trying to impart. So I found her writing luscious and exciting and not opaque. But I can understand why people might look at that and say, oh, that's a bit much. It's not a bit much for me. I love it. So let me back up and tell you actually what this book is about. It is about a mermaid and a plague doctor who are wandering around a kingdom that has been ruined. And the mermaid was married to a king, but he's dead. And the plague doctor always wears their mask. And so the mermaid, while she has familiarity with the doctor, she's not sure if the doctor is a man or a woman or even a human, just knows that this is someone that she trusts. Now, as this unusual pair are wending their way through the world, they come across a group of children, a little almost tribe of children who are enthralled to a group of 3 saints who are compelling them to perform ritualized surgery on each other. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, as you might imagine, this book is gory and grotesque, but like The Library at Hellebore, which is coming out soon, which I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of, and Nothing But Blackened Teeth, Khaw has this way of using beautiful language, just rapturous words, to describe perfectly ugly, ugly things. Sorry, there's sirens going on outside. Maybe hopefully they're saving the children who are cutting each other up. There's something delicate yet thick about her writing, like thick, like with 2 C's. There's something like chunky and juicy, but at the same time, incredibly precise about the way that she wields her words, that I find just... Now, our mermaid is not Ariel, and she has a moral compass, but her actions seem very alien to the 2-legged folk of the earth. What she does not make sense in the context of humanity, but it is clear that it makes sense in the context of being a sister and a daughter of the sea. The next 2 books I want to talk about are books that I binged preparing for StokerCon, and I speak about them at length in the video about StokerCon, which I will leave a link to below if you want to learn more about those books, but I'm just going to talk about them in terms of their cult context. The first book is American Rapture by C.J. Leede, which I am starting to think is probably my favorite book that I read this year. It is about a pandemic that overtakes America. It is not a nice, wholesome flu or COVID pandemic. It is a pandemic where if you get sick, maybe you get better, maybe you die, or maybe you turn into an aggressive, horrible, evil sex monster, which is not good. And so if you can imagine a America where there are some horrible, raging, awful people monsters running around who not only will attack you sexually, which is terrifying and awful, but they might infect you and turn you into a similar monster as well. And now, having said that, and having said, oh, this is my favorite book, you probably think I'm a psycho. I am not. It focuses primarily on teenagers. She's 16 years old, and she lives in a house where her parents are religious fanatics, and their zealotry has destroyed their family. They are repressive and sheltering, and they have kicked their young son out of the house and sent him off to a place to be rehabilitated because he is not the person that they feel is godly and should be in their home, and to the point that they are disavowing him as their child until such time as he straightens up and flies right, according to them. Sophie is the young woman. She's a bit of a late bloomer, and so she is kind of having her sexual awakening during this pandemic, and normal reactions of hormones and getting crushes and falling in love, all those things are so foreign to her, or if not foreign, shameful. She's been made to feel shame about these things to the point that she doesn't know what is normal and what is a symptom of becoming an evil sex monster, which is weirdly funny and also awful. So we are following her around as she's escaping and hitting the road, and trying to find a refuge where she can be safe. Now, exacerbating the situation exponentially is a cult called Michael's Crusaders, who believe that the pandemic is just God's divine justice, his punishment on America for tolerating drag bunches and having banned books in public schools that they think promote promiscuity and fornication and gay people and all the other things that they don't like. So they feel that any attempt to stop the pandemic or to ameliorate the situation or to heal people or to create a vaccine, they feel that that is going against God's will, and they are trying to stop that. I would argue that they are worse than the evil sex monsters because the evil sex monsters don't actually have agency anymore, and these are people who are willfully, aggressively ignorant and awful. And that part of the book is terrible, but the rest of the book is amazing and delightful in a strange way. And Sophie, I think, is one of my favorite protagonists that I have read in years. I just find her endlessly delightful, and I am absolutely cheering for her. Now, I would also check all the trigger warnings on this one for obvious reasons, but also because there is an animal in it who is lovely and wonderful, and bad things happen to that animal. So know that going in. The Sundowner Dance is about a widower who is in his 70s. He's retired, and he has decided that he is going to move into a senior living community. He is very sad. His wife was the center of his world. He's a very introverted man, And so she was the reason he'd get out of the house and do stuff. Now, with her gone, his world has become incredibly circumscribed. And he, in an act of, well, maybe it's optimism, or maybe he's just trying to escape the memories of walking around his house and not seeing his wife there. It is unclear. It is probably both. He decides to move to Fairacre. At StokerCon, I met Todd Keisling, and he gave me this brochure for that community. It is delightful. It seems like a great place. Look at all those smiling people. And look at Arthur Peterson. What a nice, friendly face he has. Arthur Peterson is the president of the Community Association. He's the chairman, actually, of the Community Association. Very welcoming community. Now, as soon as Jerry moves into Fairacres, he's wondering if he made a mistake, because his neighbor across the street is just kind of zoning out, smiling. Hi. And says things like, "By the moon's eye, what a wonderful day it is outside." Everyone seems to be saying "by the moon's eye." And he asks, "What does that mean?" And they say, "It's just a little thing we say around here. You'll get used to it." And he's like, "Okay, that's weird." But he lets it go, leaning into this adventure that he has set himself into, and also has invested all of his money into. So it will not be easy for him to get out if he wants to get out. This book is a cult-adjacent cosmic horror. It isn't your traditional cult, but Jerry is going to have a hard time leaving if he decides to leave. And it is disgusting and gross and gory and gnarly. And at the same time, it is very human and very beautiful. And the last few pages, I was just sobbing my eyes out. So if you want barfy, icky, yucky with a side of pathos, this is the book for you. As I was getting ready for this video, I decided to go through my Goodreads list and go through my shelves to see what other books about cults that I had read. And the answer is not many at all. In fact, there were only 2 that I could find easily, and I also read those both in this year. So apparently cults are having a moment. I wonder why that is. Anyway, I digress. Cults are so not a part of my normal reading list that when I told my mom that I was gonna do a video about cults, she's like, "Oh, about baby horses? Like my friend Snickers over here?" And I said, no. Like, you know, Charles Manson and Jim Jones, that kind of cult. And she's like, "Oh, And that's how I feel too. Because cults are not good, as many historians have noted. So, the 2 books that I read earlier this year, I've spoken about both at length, and I will leave a link to those videos, but I will talk a little bit about their culty aspects now. The first one is The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica, which tells the story of a post-apocalyptic society, a group of women and one man who doesn't show himself to the women. He kind of speaks to them behind a screen. But it's a group of women who are in this very strict hierarchy, who are being controlled and manipulated and hurt by a very sadistic superior sister who is in charge of what the women folk do in this society. They are better off in some ways than the people outside the cloister's walls. They have food and they have water, which people fending for themselves don't have. But at the same time, the currency within the community is cruelty. And it is a very disturbing book. It is also beautifully written, and there is some moments of incredible grace in it as well, but it is a rough read. The other book that I read earlier in the year that has some culty overtones is Mr. Magic, which is about a children's television show that everybody seems to remember, but they remember it differently. No one can agree kind of who was on it. They can't agree how long it lasted. They can't agree what the kids did while they were on the show, like what activities they did or what the focus of the show was. But people seem to love it. It helped them form their morality in the same way that you might watch Sesame Street and learn about sharing and learn about the positive aspects of curiosity and of cooperation and all of that stuff. So it had some good lessons in there for some of its viewers. For others, they said that it felt a little darker, but who can tell, because there are no episodes of it that still exist, and the Wikipedia page keeps getting scrubbed. The main crux of the plot is a reunion of the cast members of the final cast, of the ones who were kids. They're adults now, but the final group of kids who were on the show when the show ended, when it was canceled. And they have been gathered for a reunion podcast. They're going to answer questions and talk to each other and try to figure out, using each other's memories, fill in the gaps and relive and hopefully maybe even heal from the negative experience of what happened after the show ended. Now, I mentioned this in my last video about this book. I saw a review from another YouTuber. I've tried to find who this was, and if it was you, please tell me. I want to credit you. There was this person who said that it is helpful to read the afterword before you read the book. And I would agree with that. There aren't spoilers to the plot of the book, but the afterword gives you some context into what the author was thinking about when she was writing the book. And I think that it is helpful to have that context in the back of your mind as you read. Our Last Resort is a thriller about a brother and a sister who grew up in a cult in the Hudson Valley in New York. And they are now adults, and they were exceptionally close growing up, and in the period after they left, they supported each other and they leaned on each other as they faced the wider world and found their place there. But over the years, they have become a little bit estranged, and they are trying to reconnect at a upscale resort in the Utah desert. Again, like Mr. Magic, but not like Mr. Magic. The rift between the two siblings started when the brother's wife disappeared and was eventually found deceased, and the brother was suspected of foul play, but never charged. He became the topic of documentaries, tabloid stories, books, and his life has been ruined, not only by missing his wife, but also because of the shadow that pretty much everybody thinks that he did something. Unfortunately, in the middle of their lovely vacation, while they're trying to reconnect, the wife of a bajillionaire tabloid publisher is found murdered at the resort, and he is under suspicion again. This book has a dual timeline. We are simultaneously trying to figure out what happened in the present day to the publisher's wife, and we are seeing what it was like growing up for the pair at the compound. Some of the scenes of that are very, very rough, and so I would check trigger warnings on this. However, this book is very compelling, and it was certainly a page turner. I read it in about 10 hours. I read it at night, and then I woke up early so that I could read the rest of it in the morning, because I wanted to finish it, because I needed to know what happened next. The last book on today's list is How Bad Things Can Get by Darcy Coates. This book comes out in August 26th, I believe, and I was lucky enough to get an advance copy. I have read maybe 5 books by Darcy Coates, and I'm going to tell you that this is my favorite, and I'm very excited for everyone else to be able to read this book in August, because it is a lot of fun. It's very gory, and the title is an unspoken rhetorical question of how bad can things get? And the answer is very, 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 very exceptionally, epically bad. They can get really, really bad. First, I want to say something about the marketing for this book. I normally wouldn't mention the marketing for this book, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way. It is being touted as Blair Witch Project meets Firefest, and I don't think either of those things are a fair comparison. They, in the sense that there are some woods and some spooky things happening in the woods, and there's a festival on an island. Sure. But no. So if that description turns you off, then do not worry. That is not what this book is about. What it is about is there are a group of influencers and fans who have been invited to a luxurious festival run by a figure named Eaton, who is kind of like a Mr. Beast figure, the YouTuber who has kind of exciting challenges and games and gives away lots of money to the participants in exchange for taking on obstacle courses or kind of ridiculous challenges. We are following a woman named Ruth, who is just on vacation with her boyfriend and a couple of their friends. And Ruth is sitting on a secret that only her boyfriend knows, which is that she is the lone survivor of a cult where everybody themselves except for her. And she was found a few days later, kind of wandering around, hungry and sick. And she is infamous as the child. No one knows who she is. And her name was changed, and it is her secret that she is that person that, people speak of, almost a mythic figure of this one little 8-year-old who managed to survive this atrocity. There are Reddit pages and books and all sorts of things trying to figure out who she is. And so she has managed to maintain this secret for years. She is now in her 20s, and she has had extensive therapy, and she's okay. And she's just trying to live her life. So she finds herself on this island just to have fun, just to be with her boyfriend who has won this trip. And there's some things that are going a little funky on the island. Mostly that it looks like Eaton seems to be playing a little fast and loose with people's safety. But she doesn't want to rock the boat, and she doesn't want to draw attention to herself. In fact, everything she has done throughout her entire life is, please don't look at me, please don't figure out who I am. I'll just go with the flow. But it seems like fate has other plans. The first night that they're there on the island, they see a big presentation about the history of the island. And as it turns out, there was a cult, not her cult, a different cult, that had tried to set up a community on the island, but the crops couldn't grow, and their leader had burned the boat so that they couldn't leave. and they were trapped there, and they all died. So there's this scary history to the island, which to the influencers and to the YouTube people, ooh, that's fascinating, that's interesting, that's spicy. But to her, you know, who actually, you know, this isn't just some sort of folk tale, you know, this is a thing that really happens, and this is a thing that she has experience with. So she is very much on edge, and people start disappearing from the festival, and then other people are saying, oh, well, that person wasn't here to start off with, so what's happening? And the answer is things are getting very, 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 very bad. I don't want to say anything more about this book because there are several twists and turns and exciting surprises in store. But I will say that I found this book a lot of fun. It's very, very gory, but in that way that like a dumb slasher movie is gory, in that you can't take it, it's so over the top, you don't take it super seriously. So it's not upsetting, like it's not like damaging, like psychologically damaging, like some horrors can be. There's no existential dread here. It's more on the kind of Friday the 13th level of horror, although there is genuine horror in this, and there is genuine frights in this. So know that. But it's just great, and I highly recommend it. So that's it. 9 books about cults that run the gamut from silly to sublime to sinister. See you next week. Bye.